You walk into a room feeling fine. You know who you are. You know what you think. And then you spend 20 minutes with a certain person, and suddenly you are not so sure anymore. That feeling is real. And if you have experienced it, you are not imagining things. There are some people in your life who leave you feeling smaller after you talk to them. Not because they yelled at you, not because they said anything obviously cruel, but because something shifted. You walked in feeling capable, and you walked out second-guessing yourself. You started questioning your opinions, your choices, your memory, maybe even your perception of what just happened. This is not a sign that something is wrong with you. This is actually a very common experience, and the fact that you noticed it means you were paying attention to something important. Here is what is really happening. Some people have learned, often without fully realizing it, that they can stay in control of a conversation by keeping the other person off balance. They do this in small ways. A raised eyebrow when you share an idea. A slight pause before they respond as if what you said was strange. A comment that sounds like a compliment but somehow makes you feel worse. A question that implies you do not know what you are talking about. None of these things are dramatic. That is what makes them so effective. They slip under your radar. You cannot point to one moment and say, that was the problem, but you can feel the overall effect. You feel confused. You feel less confident. You feel like maybe you should just stop talking. And here is the part that matters. That confusion is not a bug. It is a feature. It is the goal. When someone makes you feel unsure of yourself, they are not doing it by accident. They are doing it because your uncertainty gives them an advantage. If you are busy doubting your own thoughts, you are not questioning theirs. If you are worried about how you are coming across, you are not noticing how they are behaving. Your self-doubt becomes a kind of fog that hides what is really going on. Now, I want to be clear about something. Not everyone who makes you feel this way is doing it on purpose. Some people learned this pattern a long time ago, maybe in their own families, and they do not even realize they are doing it. It became automatic. But whether it is intentional or not, the effect on you is the same. You leave the interaction feeling like less of yourself. So let us shift how we think about this. If you feel confident around most people, but you suddenly feel unsure around one specific person, that is information. It is not proof that you have a confidence problem. It is a signal about the dynamic between you and that person. Your self-doubt in that moment is not a character flaw. It is a response. Your mind is picking up on something that does not feel safe, even if you cannot name it yet. This is actually a kind of intelligence. Your nervous system is reacting to subtle cues in the environment, the tone of voice, the timing of responses, the way someone holds eye contact a little too long or looks away at just the wrong moment. You may not be able to explain why you feel uneasy, but your body is doing its job. It is trying to protect you. The problem is that most of us were never taught to trust that signal. We were taught to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to assume that if we feel bad after a conversation, we must have done something wrong. So instead of questioning the other person, we question ourselves. We take the doubt they created and we aim it inward. But what if you started to see that doubt differently? What if, instead of thinking, I must be the problem, you thought, interesting, I only feel this way around this one person? That small shift changes everything. It takes the spotlight off your supposed flaws and puts it back on the relationship. It lets you ask better questions. Not what is wrong with me, but what is happening here? There are a few things that often become clearer once you start paying attention. One is that these people tend to keep you explaining yourself. You find yourself defending your choices, your feelings, your memory of events. And no matter how clearly you explain, it never seems to be enough. The conversation keeps going in circles. That is not because you are bad at communicating. It is because resolution is not the goal. Keeping you uncertain is the goal. Another thing you might notice is that your feelings get dismissed in subtle ways. You say something bothered you, and they respond with surprise, as if your reaction is strange. Or they tell you that you are too sensitive. Or they reframe the situation so that you end up comforting them instead of addressing what hurt you. Over time, this trains you to stop trusting your own emotional responses. You might also notice that you feel pressure to perform around this person, not just to be yourself, but to be a certain version of yourself. The version that does not make waves, the version that laughs things off, the version that agrees. When you catch yourself editing your personality to avoid a reaction, that is worth paying attention to. None of this means you need to cut people out of your life or have a big confrontation. That is not the point. The point is simply to notice, to start separating your actual sense of self from the version of you that shows up when you are around someone who keeps you off balance. Because here's the truth. Your confidence is not as fragile as it feels in those moments. It is being interfered with. There's a difference between having low self-esteem and having your self-esteem lowered by someone else. One is an internal pattern, the other is an external pressure, and they require very different responses. When you start to see the pattern, something interesting happens. The fog begins to lift. You stop automatically blaming yourself. You get a little bit of distance from the confusion. And in that distance, you can think more clearly. You can ask yourself what you actually believe instead of scrambling to figure out what you are supposed to believe. You do not have to fix this overnight. You do not have to have a perfect response ready the next time it happens. Just noticing is enough for now. Just recognizing that you are not broken, that you are responding to something real, that your doubt has a source outside of you. That recognition is already a kind of freedom. The version of you that exists when you are not around that person is still you. It did not disappear. It is just waiting for a little more room to breathe, and it will.